So here we are where we left off, and our orders have gone through. And I left this screen up. This is what appeared after the orders finalized. Notice we're sort of in a mode here. It says processing. Please refresh. One of the things I didn't point out earlier that I will now is there's a refresh button here that if you run into a situation where you believe that you had performed a task, but you're not seeing evidence of that, don't forget that you click here, you can do a refresh, and that notice in this case, the refresh brought up our orders. So we're able to see the orders that we had placed since we are on the orders tab here. So let's go back into LaunchPoint, and I'll just quickly point something out. Notice that we have our one patient that we're assigned to in the department here. So this is our patient in the ED. And if you wanted to quickly go back into the patient chart that we just placed some orders, so we want to go back and do some documentation. This patient's tab has its own now. It's been placed in its own separate bar here. Just as a side note, up to 7 patients can accumulate here, so you can toggle back and forth between them. So and then it'll limit out after that, so you'll have to close the bar to see it. Just a point of interest, you'll notice or remember before I showed you about the filtering and how you can start with all the patients in Sturdy ED, and then below there were some icons that are not visible now that you could click on to filter further. So once this added a bar, there was a limitation on the number of bars here. You notice that sort of disappeared. So if you just look off to the right here, there's like a little down arrow. We'll expose that again, and so you can see that. So we can see, let's go back in. Let's say we wanted to assign ourselves to a patient. These are the unassigned patients in the department, and I'm just going to assign myself to this patient because I'm ready to sign up for a new patient. As I do that, now I'm signed up for 2 patients. Now if I were to open the new patient's chart, so this is the Jessica test. Again, I can left click on this just to look into her chart, but let's say I wanted to add orders. I'll point out to you that she now appeared on that bar alongside Melissa, so we can sort of toggle now to and from between patients and see those patients. So let's do some documentation. So here we are. We're going to left click on our patient's name, and that brings us up into the ED workflow. Speaking of pointing out toolbars, I'll point this out to you here. Where right now it opened up into ED workflow. ED workflow allows us to see this end page, this listing of uh, selections we can make to populate our documentation. One of the things you may notice right off the bat if you've been playing with Cerner for a little bit is that normally there's 2 separate columns here, and I happen to be working today on a laptop computer, and so you're not seeing it's conforming the size of of what I pulled up to the laptop screen. In the department, you're going to be having a much larger screen, so you'll be able to see your full view. But let's say you're working from home like I am, and you have a laptop and you want to see your full 3-pane view. Easy enough. You have to just change the percentage to reduce the size a little bit, and that will allow the view that you're more familiar with to populate. So now you see what you probably created earlier, which is your listing of the essential components of your documentation off to the right. While we're talking about this column off to the right that you'd created, if you recall, when you created this, you had created it in an order. This is ordered when this was built. The first thing that was moved over with these little arrow buttons, when the HPI component was over here, and you clicked on its arrow and pushed it over to here, this was the first component that we placed, and then next in order was I added the review of systems. Next in order I put the physical exam. If for some reason, I point this out because if for some reason you accidentally, as you're clicking along, happen to click on this right arrow, which would bring the HPI back to this this column, because these act like stacked blocks, that would bring up the review of systems, and if you tried to move at that point, say this is the HPI, if you try to move the HPI back over to the right, it would actually bring it down to the bottom it would place it under assessment and plan, below assessment and plan. And so and there's really no way to, once you do that, to sort of drag it back up. So unfortunately, the only way to reorder them in your preferred fashion is to sort of individually bring everything back over again and then bring it back from the left to the right in the order that you want it. It's just an aside, but so let's say we want to start up our documentation. Well, this allows us, the ED workflow allows us to scroll down and see items of interest. In this particular patient, we're able to sort of see vital signs as we did when we went through the triage. We've got the latest vital signs here, and then we can sort of scroll down and we can see what the nurse had put in as the patient's chief problem, which you'll notice because this was placed by the nurse in triage, uh, the patient's problem is chest pain, but there's no ICD-10 code associated with it. It's important that you don't delete the nurse's problem that they input, because the nurse will have different, when they put in their orders, their triage orders, it gets associated with this, and if you were to delete it, it causes them documentation issues. So you can leave those in, and when you put your own problems in, the problems will actually associate with an ICD-10 code. I'll show you an example of that right now. So here's, let's add on this patient actually, remember, put an abdominal pain order set for her. So we actually put in abdominal pain and do a search. And this is a very, you never want to really put in a very, very general thing like abdominal pain. You can put in the right lower quadrant abdominal pain. At this point, we don't know if she has, what exactly she has. We can't really assign her and say this is appendicitis, but let's say, for the purposes of just demonstrating this, I wanted to show you that when you put in the problem, it assigns an ICD-10 code, and this indicates that the provider put in the complaint. So if you were to sort of change your mind and say, whoops, so I actually didn't want abdominal pain, I actually wanted right lower abdominal pain, you'll see there's no delete button. However, this highlighted for this visit. So if you just click on that, it'll sort of undo it. It will essentially remove it. So let's say we wanted to put in abdominal pain, right? Should bring up pain of the abdominal pain of the right upper quadrant, abdominal pain of the right lower quadrant. That sounds like what this patient had in my estimation. So now we assign the ICD-10 code for that. All of these problems that have an associated ICD-10 code that are for this current visit will appear. I'm going to scroll down on the right here. It'll appear in your assessment and plan. So you notice once I put that in, it instantly appeared here. So when we do our documentation, we can do what our assessment and plan is for that particular problem. So let's just go ahead and start up with a few things with the documentation. So we do our HPI, we're going to be dictating that in Dragon. So your Dragon icon is up here, and let's see if I can get pull up Dragon for purposes of our demo. So Dragon's pulled up now, and we'll just put a little bit here. This is a 35-year-old patient presenting with abdominal pain. All right, that was a really detailed HPI, wasn't it? And now for review systems, you can either have a review systems that you save in your Dragon, or you could, if you've highlighted a lot of review systems in your HPI, you can type in here review systems otherwise negative, or you can utilize this dot, putting in a period, and then ROS, and this is a way you can populate the review of systems for is a tool that's embedded in Cerner, and you can just go through this toggle menu and indicate what is a positive in your review systems. Along the way, for each field, if you can refresh the data here, and so we can go do that along the way, but you don't necessarily have to, because it actually auto saves and refreshes. For our physical exam, we're going to use our Dragon here to enter our normal physical exam. Normal physical exam. And then you can make adjustments to your physical exam. If you had an EKG, you can put your interpretation of the EKG in here. Uh, as a note to you, let's say I wanted to include EKG in my listing of items to complete off to the right for all patients. So this will pop up for all patients. But this patient, let's say, doesn't have an EKG to record. When we create a note and finalize that note, any field that's blank that doesn't get used will disappear. So we won't see an EKG heading in the final note. Same thing for procedures. If we don't do a procedure during this visit, it won't appear there. Now, in the past in Meditech, our MDM, our medical decision making, would include a listing of a summary and would include what we're doing for each individual problem. In Cerner, what we're doing moving forward is we're putting in a brief couple of lines in medical decision making to sort of outline our general assessment, and then we go into assessment and plan to sort of delineate for each problem what we're going to be what we're going to do or how we address those problems. So I'm just going to put in a little sample here just for the purposes of our demo, and I will say uh, this is a 35-year-old female presenting with abdominal pain with features concerning for possible acute appendicitis. I will obtain labs as well as a CT scan of the abdomen and pelvis for evaluation, period. And then here we are for abdominal pain, and let's say at this point we're doing our assessment and plan, and we sort of have resulted for this patient, and we have results for the abdominal pain CT, so we can sort of put in what all turned out to be since we're fast forwarding in time and we have all results. The CT scan of the abdomen and pelvis obtained for the right lower quadrant abdominal symptoms was negative for acute appendicitis, period. There was no acute process identified on the CT scan, period. The patient's pain resolved with morphine, period. And so we can add on and put other features of the patient's visit. I'm not creative enough at the moment to come up with a scenario for you to for that purpose. But what I will point out is that during the course of the patient's visit, all the orders that we placed will populate here. So let's say we've sort of wrapped up this patient's visit and we've made all the assessments and changes we're going to make. Now we want to save or create a note. So we're going to save here, and now we've sort of saved this area. And to create the note, we'll pull down our menu on this side, and we'll get to the bottom, and it will say ED provider note. So we're just going to click here. And now what it's doing, that we've saved all those fields, it's sort of populating everything that we put in that other section. It's populating it in a note, so you can see it all here. And there's, like I said, was referenced before, there are certain fields that we're not going to see. We're not going to see items because we did not do those things. So here, the procedure is here. However, once we do a final signing and saving in this field, we will those will disappear. Let's at this point, once you've sort of inputted the bulk of your note, and if labs have resulted, which because this is a test patient, we really don't have a full complement of our labs returning, but just the glucose is back on this test patient. Normally the labs would populate in here. Let's say we're ready to do a save and create a note. So we're going to save the note now, and this is by saving the note in this field, we're actually now in the process. We're going to establish a note. We're going to create a note. So it identifies when we were doing this, and it's going to, if we click OK here, we're now committing to a note. And now, as a point of interest, as an important point of interest, now that we've done that, we've actually created a note. We haven't signed it, and submitted it, so we haven't finalized it yet. But now, once we've done this, we can no longer edit the note in that ED workflow off to the right. From now on, if we have any future edits, we're going to edit it in directly in here. So I'll show you how to access and get back into this. But because we're running out of time, we're going to go into the next video.